There we go. All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the October webinar of TVDM Consultants. This morning, we are quite privileged to have a guest speaker by the name of Cole Smith of Sandek Lewin Trust. I first met Cole not only in practice, but as the property manager of the building where I used to live. And for many years, Cole tried to shake us off, and we kept on threatening to say we're going to leave unless he is our property manager. Of course, Cole has the very important task of running Sandek Lewin Trust and the hundreds and hundreds of buildings that they manage, as well as the very large staff component that they have with his right hand staff. I know Natasha Towers is one of them, and she's online this morning. So I think we're very, very lucky to have somebody that works so entrenched in the trenches speaking to us this morning. Cole, as I mentioned, you don't have to worry about the admin of the meeting. It is being recorded. And if you do have any questions, anybody, you're more than welcome to post it in the chats. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to raise your hand. And on that note, Cole, over to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Zelinda. Morning to everybody. Thanks for joining. Zelinda has given you a brief overview of how I'm involved in the industry. Just to give you a bit more insight, I started in this industry in 1995 with Trafalgar. I was there back then. We were one of the privileged provinces in which we had people like Graham Paddock, Tasha Maria, Professor van der Merwe, and all of those available to us. So the rest of the country was quite envious. But yeah, that's what I started with, and had the privilege of working with some very, very interesting people back then. And why I'm mentioning it is because back then there was another gentleman, but he was based in Johannesburg, and he used to come down to Cape Town on Trafalgar's request, and he had a very practical application for sectional title. And that's kind of the basis of what I'm using for today, is a portion of what he used to bring across. His name was Bob Gould. Bob used to present on 702 Talk Radio, and great guy. I think there are quite a few people that might remember him, and he had a great way of bringing sectional title across. I know today we have a few people that are doing that quite well, but that's what I was introduced to. And I've been with Sandek Lewin now for nearly over 19 years, and I think a lot of us that are in this industry have to deal with these crazy type of events. And I thought this was one that was very pertinent because it happens in a lot of body corporates, and the trustees are always reluctant to get involved sometimes, and other times they want to get involved. And that's when an owner is not maintaining their section. And I thought it appropriate that we try and sketch a scenario. Maybe we'll elaborate on it even further, and then we can flesh out where, from a practical point of view, a managing agent or even a trustee would look at this particular situation. So in the interest of protecting the innocent or the not so innocent, the names and body corporate have been changed. And in this instance, we have two neighbors, and there is what is a leak from one flat to the other. And upstairs, we have Mr. Uptight, and we all have Mr. Uptight in our body corporates. He is very, very quick to jump on your case and tell you that there's a problem and it needs to be sorted out. And then you also, and below him, there was a lovely lady, and she's called Mrs. Know-it-all. And Mrs. Know-it-all is the type that will tell you that it's your responsibility, it's the body corporate's responsibility, and my flat is a disaster, even though there's just a little black mark on the wall or on the ceiling. And this obviously then will get put into the situation where the body corporate managing agent or the trustees has been approached to say, right, we have this problem. Mrs. Know-it-all sending us a whole lot of emails. She's complaining about this damp and it needs to be sorted out. And from a practical point of view, the body corporate trustees and managing agents are now forced to go look at things as to, okay, it's potentially a balcony that's leaking because it's happening only when it's raining, or we hope it's only happening when it's raining, but we need to eliminate things. But from a practical point of view, what's the first step to in this particular situation? And that's actually to go determine whether we're actually dealing with the section, common property, exclusive use area, and we have to start at the beginning. And to start at the beginning means that we need to go look at a sectional title plan, determine whether that balcony is or isn't part of the section. And I know that sometimes people find plans daunting, but sectional title plans aren't that difficult to read. If there's a solid line right around that particular section, then the balcony is part of the section. If it's a broken line around the balcony, then it's exclusive use. And most importantly, on most of the sectional title plans, they'll indicate if an area is marked as CP, being common property. So if we've established then the definition of a section in terms of Section 5 of the Sectional Title Sectional Title Act will tell us the section runs from the median line, in other words, the middle of a wall, the middle of a window, the middle of a floor, and that determines where we are in terms of the responsibilities. And here it's very important why we do that, because if there is common property involved, then body corporate's involved.
Yeah,
However, where we're dealing with two sections and no common property involved, we now sit in a situation where the body corporate trustees are saying, should we be involved? Is this actually not a matter that should be between two owners and not involve the trustees at all? Now, we know that there's an obligation in terms of the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, Section 13, which says, just hold on, you are responsible in terms of Section 13(1)(c) that to maintain your section. So the obligation is on the owner. We've confirmed that this section is a section. The area that we potentially believe is the leak, or the leak is coming from, or the damp is coming from, is part of the section. So it's an owner's obligation to maintain. Now, okay, at this point in time, once again, the question is still, should the trustees be involved? Is there a requirement in the legislation for them to be involved? And one of the matters, and I think that, trustees, we always forget that trustees are people that haven't had serious amounts of training. They're doing it voluntarily. Yeah, and I will say that in where we have got to in sectional title, a lot of people are doing paddock sectional title courses, the late Tertius Arias course. There's the University of Pretoria course. So a lot of people are making themselves aware. And I know one of the ladies that's joined us today has a fantastic book, which is a must. If I'm a body corporate trustee and I haven't got the kind of background that it's required, that's a book. I think, Shirley Bailey's handbook, fantastic book. It's not in any way something that you need to go and have a knowledge of law behind it. It gives you an insight into just looking at various problems and knowing references in the legislation. So that's, as a trustee, maybe you've got a body corporate that isn't being managed by a managing agent. You want to look to give some guidance. So we now set the scenario. We're once again back to saying, should the trustees be involved? And there is an obligation on the owner to maintain, but similarly, there is an aspect in terms of the legislation which says in Management Rule 31(2), and I'm just going to read it because I think it's pertinent that we understand what it says. If, despite written demand by the body corporate, a member refuses or fails to repair or maintain a section owned by that member in a state of good repair as required by Section 13(1)(c) of the Act, and that failure threatens, and this is the conditions. I think this is where we need to focus our time. And that failure threatens the stability of the common property, the safety of the building, or otherwise materially prejudices the interests of the body corporate, its members, or the occupiers of sections generally, The body corporate must remedy the member's failure and recover the reasonable cost of doing so from that member, provided in the case of an emergency, no demand or notice need to be given to the member concerned. Now, we can focus on the conditions, but you actually need to start with the heading of 31.2. If despite written demand by the body corporate. So it actually is saying, if you're not maintaining your section, the body corporate can issue you a letter to say you need to fix your section. The conditions set what action should, if there's going to be further action. So we actually do feel that when there's a matter that is brought to the attention of the trustees, the trustees have an obligation to act. It's taking it to the next level that becomes the problem. Because what happens? Mrs. Know-it-all is now jumping up and down. She's threatening to take this to CSOS, and ultimately it's always going to be taking the body corporate and the trustees, because that's the person that she's saying. She's not dealing with Mr. Uptight. She's going, body corporate, you must sort out your matter. And she's right. You should be sending a letter to that owner saying, you need to fix the problem. But, and this is what happens in practice all the time. It gets butted back to that owner to say, sorry, this is an issue between you and the owner above. Please address it, but to the owner above. And obviously we have the new introduction of our favorite 4-letter word, Poppy, that comes up. And yep, first thing that the managing agent turns around and says, sorry, I can't give you the owner's details. Promotion, Poppy says, I can't give it to you. But is that correct? It's not correct. It's actually one of the reasons that Poppy is there for. And we have a piece of legislation which is just as powerful as Poppy, which is the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, Management Rule 27.2 through to 27.4, that says this is the information the body corporate should hold, and you as a member are entitled to it. So if Mrs. Know-it-all was to say, I want to contact Mr. Uptight upstairs, the body corporate is within its right to provide what information Mr. Uptight has given as his registered address to Mrs. Know-it-all. And then she can take the issue further. If she decides to take it to CSOS, fantastic. If she decides to take it to a legal avenue, that's what she can do. However, and the purpose of discussion today is what happens when we get to the next level. The next level is, what if that damage that's coming through to Mrs. Know-it-all's apartment is actually of such a nature that it is affecting, materially prejudicing the body corporate? Is it now of such a nature that we've got an old building, we've got a floor, it's the old style of building with steel beams within that concrete slab. Those, when water gets into it, start to expand. And I'm no expert on all these things, so these are just things that I've learned over the last 20 odd years. And that can be affecting the structure. Now, that, I believe, is where the body corporate has the right to now start saying, we're going to actually intervene here. And I know it was actually quite strange. I was on our favorite social media platform, which I'm not allowed to advertise, Facebook. And it was a case of, hold on, a question just like that was raised. And straightforward answer was 31. There we go. You can do it. And one of the people came back and said, what happens if they don't give access? And that is obviously the problem that faces body corporate trustees. Now, prior to 2000, or let's say we know from 2016, we had the Ombud and the Ombud Act, but the Ombud was actually there from before that. That's the route to follow. And it's just an urgent application through the OMBIT. I'm sorry to knock the OMBIT, but I don't think urgent applications are actually happening. But hopefully that is something that would be taking place, because that is hopefully where they can intervene and get it going. But we still have this obligation that the body corporate can now, because of those instances there, start using funds which in terms of our legislation are for body corporate expenses. And this is where some people will say, but hold on, we can't use levies for anything other than what's in the budget. And the budget says they're supposed to be used for common property related matters. But if we read through the aspect of that particular piece of legislation, which is in section 3 of the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, we actually get to the point of saying there is a part of that component which says any obligation of the body corporate. Now, an obligation to maintain a section 4 is given to the owner. An obligation to force the owner to maintain that section is given in 31, and 31(2)(b) says they can recover that cost. So we can spend the money. We can go waterproof that balcony if it has to be waterproofed. If it's an aspect of a railing that is causing the problem or whatever it is, we can. But how do the trustees know that what's gone wrong, whether it is actually materially prejudicing the building, the owner below, or whatever? And this part is where I think trustees need professional guidance. They need to have somebody that's an engineer or similar that is going to say to them, yes, there is a risk here. Or the worst case scenario is where the apartment down below has now become uninhabitable. And you actually need the guidance from your insurance broker. And I know we've got Mike Addison online as well. And I'm sure Mike will be saying, yep, I'll say whether it's uninhabitable or not. He'll guide you. And there are other brokers out there as well to say, hold on, this is actually a problem. This person can't stay here anymore. And that, I believe, is now, once again, in terms of 31(2)(b), a situation where the body corporate can act. So those are the things that the trustees need to arm themselves with. And I mean, the third aspect of that would be going to consultants like Zelinda and saying, we need to know, are we doing the right thing? And overall, what I'm trying to get at is trustees aren't attorneys. They're not contractors. They're not experts in this field. More and more emphasis is put on managing agents to give them guidance. And there are limitations to how far the managing agent can take it. But getting the guidance from a professional is always in the best interest of the scheme, and the trustees are obligated in terms of their fiduciary responsibility to do that. And they should be getting the proper guidance. We regularly forget that we expect so much of these people who volunteer their time at no cost to the body corporate, and they feel they're doing the right thing. And 9 times out of 10 they are, and sometimes they don't. And that, I believe, is where it's better to have got the professional guidance. I mean, we always say we got to get a valuation done. You know, we don't go get an estate agent to do a valuation. We get a professional that does valuations, because they carry the right they have the right knowledge, and they have the right cover in place in terms of something they do wrong. Now, yes, trustees do get indemnified in the Act, but rather put yourself in a position that you're doing the correct thing in the best interest of the body corporate. So we've got section 3 that says we can spend money on something that the body corporate's obligated to do. But then we have another aspect. I know on my slide it's a little wrong, but I'm going to take us to an aspect where it's not that management rule. Well, actually it is, sorry, apologies. It is that management rule. What if the entire scenario is wrong? And I had a discussion yesterday with one of my managers, and nothing in terms of 31B, in terms of those conditions were being in any way met. And the body corporate trustees were going to actually do a leak detection on that balcony. So by that, they're going to appoint a contractor. That contractor is going to ask for payment, and the body corporate is going to pay him out of levies. Is that actually correct? Because by doing that, and it's if the leak detection, and I use this as one condition, if the leak detection turns out that the balcony is leaking, it's an obligation to maintain that balcony, which rests on the owner, not on the body corporate. And ultimately, the body corporate has just lent that owner money. And that's where Management Rule 21.2 comes in, because you can't do that. The trustees don't have that authority. They do not have the authority, except under a unanimous resolution, to go lend money to anyone. So that's the fine line. The fine line is that scenario. Mr. Uptight, you have to get a leak detection done. Here's the contractor, get it done. The obligation to make payment is between owner and contractor. Body corporate has fulfilled its obligation in terms of issuing a demand to that owner to say, sort it out. And we don't have this situation. And you may say that's trivial. Well, it was trivial enough that one of my fellow managing agents made that mistake. Not in terms of a leak detection. They paid out for an insurance claim before the body corporate got the money. They were taken to CSOS, and CSOS ruled against that managing agent. Is one of the cases. You can actually find it on the CSOS website. I'm not going to mention names because I don't think that's appropriate, but they ruled against them. And they made that managing agent pay the body corporate, because obviously it got worse. I think it wasn't paid out. And the body corporate had tried to resolve an issue regarding damages, and the managing agent was held responsible for that cost. And if you don't have a managing agent, you could find the trustees being held responsible because they've acted outside of their authority. It clearly says, go get a unanimous resolution if you want to do this. So we have the fine line in terms of determining what of 31 2B has been, is affecting this particular issue. And now the body corporate can act. And I know that there's always the scenario of we're trying to help that owner. We're trying to sort out the matter for the owner below. But that's where the trustees cannot get involved. It's not an issue that involves the body corporate. This is a matter that's that owner's responsibility. And the minute they step over that particular threshold, they now are taking money that every owner is contributing. And we're talking admin fund here. So as administrative fund that's covering a whole lot of expenses of the body corporate, and they're using it to make on a section that they shouldn't be involved in. Huge risk. So the trustees need to ensure that this obligation is giving them that authority. Now, if we go back to the old legislation we had prior to October 2016, we had the same aspect. We had in 44.1c, same aspect, maintainee section in a state of good repair. But then we had Management Rule 70. And Management Rule 70 was if any such failure persists for a period of 30 days after giving written notice, so similar to what 31 is, the trustees of from a notice from the trustee of the managing agent to repair or to maintain, the body corporate shall be entitled to remedy the owner's failure to recover, subject to section 31B, the reasonable cost of doing so from such owner. So no conditions. Now we have conditions, because without those conditions, we fall into that trap. And we also have this management rule 21.2, which says, hold on, you can't do this. You can't just go and use our money to go and fix this section. So you come back to the point of needing to say, right, as part of a process, and we come back to this very, very interesting part of saying, where should we go? We reach the point where we've got Mrs. Know-it-all banging at the door of the managing agent, sending her lovely emails to the managing agent's representative, who's forwarding it on to the trustees, and she's reading the Riot Act on a whole different level. Mr. Uptight is ignoring any kind of communication. And now the trustees are forced to act. They must, that obligation is there, but how far do they take it? It's got to that fine line of saying, where are we? Right, we're here. Is it a risk? Is there of these factors here that we need to use? No, right. We can send the letter. He doesn't obligate. Mrs. Know-it-all, you have the full right to communicate with that owner. We're not going to give the details. If she requests it, we give the details. And you can take it through to the community schemes ombuds services and go through the process of having a conciliation. And if necessary, and hopefully you can sort it out around the table. And if you can't, we end up at an adjudication. That facility is there for a reason. It's worked well, because I must say, I've been a few times there, some very good people in Cape Town's office, Advocate William Payne, I can't think of all of them. I'm going to forget all their names, and I know them all. I see them too regularly. That's the problem. I don't see them regularly enough anymore because they're all working remotely. But you know, they're very good people. The conciliators are always trying to get it to the point of resolving the matter, because that's the best solution. If you can resolve it around a table, fantastic. Because why can't we? We're part of a community, hence the name community schemes. So I think it's there that a lot of these matters going to community scheme ombud get sorted out. And as I was going to say, a lot of them get sorted out in conciliation. The few that go to adjudication have to go. Obviously, the one aspect, if it's affecting the common property, the body corporate is obligated to maintain its common property in terms of 3 of the Act. And the same would apply here. The body corporate is then obligated to take action. And if they have to maintain, if their action is to maintain that section, it's because they're protecting the interests of the body corporate. Once again, 31.2b gives us that authority. Now we get to the point where we can't get access because Mr. Uptight's really locked the doors and he's not letting us in. And we also will end up going to the community schemes ombuds services to get us access to force Mr. Uptight in the door. To open the door, and we can now take the necessary action, or he is now obligated through whatever the adjudicator decides to maintain his section. So that's the one scenario, but there are others. There are other scenarios where we end up involving the body corporate, and that's where we have an exclusive use balcony. And once again, we need to go back to the start. And we need to go, right, it's an exclusive use area. We've confirmed that through the plans or the rules. We then turn around and say, what's the obligation? 13.1c again, to keep it neat and tidy. We're dealing with an exclusive use area in terms of the plans, because we'll deal with the rules aspect shortly. Are we collecting a levy? Yes. What component of that, how is that levy broken down? And this, I think, is one of the issues where body corporates sometimes just fail in terms of realizing that we've got a levy. What is it actually contributing towards? Easily insurance, maybe a utility or two, but it's also a provision for maintenance. Now, the difficulty that a lot of body corporates have is, we don't look at it like that. We go, we're raising a levy. We haven't now separated it into insurance and all those things. And then, and if we have we kept accurate record of how much money we've spent maintaining that exclusive use area out of the levies that we're collecting? Because that's another aspect. Now, if you're not keeping record, you are sitting in a difficult situation. And yes, hopefully within that financial year, you would say, we need to provide for this maintenance on the exclusive use areas. We're collecting this amount for that year. One offsets against the other. And that's the simple scenario. The more complicated one is we haven't done any maintenance for 5 years on that exclusive use area. Now we need to do maintenance. Are we obligated to go all the way back? How far back do we go? And those are questions that, varying opinions on that. I sometimes think if you haven't been keeping accurate records, how on earth are you going to be able to do that? And my guidance is usually to look at the financial year. It's a little bit cleaner. You go, we got 500 Rand a month, of that 350s towards maintenance, and how we're collecting X amount, we're spending this amount, fine, we're covered. But we do reach the scenarios where we don't, and we're going to have to recover more from that owner. But ultimately, the owner is not obligated to maintain the area. He's paying a levy, and out of that levy comes the responsibility on the body corporate to maintain the area, because that's what the legislation says. It does not say the waterproofing failed, it's your problem. It says I must keep it neat and tidy. So I've got to sweep, wash, do whatever to keep my exclusive use balcony neat and tidy. Here, straightforward. We're collecting a levy. That levy is a purpose through the budget for maintenance. There's no aspect of bringing 31 into here. The body corporate is obligated to maintain common property. Even though that person has an exclusive use right over it, the body corporate must maintain it. And that, I think, a lot of times trustees try to deflect it back to the owner and say, no, but it's your garden. It's your balcony. You must sort it out. And they're not right. You, trustees, simple fact of the matter, you got 3 that says you can levy an exclusive use levy, what it should cover, and also in 3, you as the body corporate are responsible to maintain that area. So a little bit more clear cut than our previous one. So the levies can be used. We don't have to worry about making a loan. We're obligated to maintain it. The recovery of additional costs for the repairs, I actually support that. I think that the body corporate has insufficiently provided and should go to that owner and say, we've had to spend 10,000, we're only going to get 7,000 Rand out of you. We're adjusting the levy. Is that wrong? Because the trustees pass a resolution based on the budget. And we're spending from that budget. We've recovered insufficiently. And the trustees' resolution determines those exclusive use levies. So that one, I think, unpacks itself very neatly. Trustees have a role. Owner has an obligation to keep neat and tidy. And you do get various exclusive use areas. Let's be honest. Keeping a parking bay neat and tidy, very easy. Don't even have to sweep it. The wind will blow everything away for you. But gardens, terraces, balconies, a little bit different. And I know back in the day, we had a case, I think it was the Solidatus case, which created all kinds of havoc for everybody that said, oh, no, body corporate's responsible to maintain the waterproofing membrane. And, the owner was responsible. I got it wrong, wherever. And it caused chaos because we all kept on saying, that's what the case says. That's what you're supposed to do. But the law read totally differently. The law hasn't changed from the old legislation. It still says, keep it neat and tidy. But we do forget one aspect.
Okay.
What happens when the rules get changed? Because we can change our rules. Management rules can get changed by unanimous resolution. Common conduct rules by special resolution. So what if we do change our rules and we say exclusive use area, owner's responsibility to maintain, not body corporates? That does get done. So many instances, so many body corporates, lovely body corporate in Sea Point, penthouse apartment, roof area, exclusive use, don't pay any levies. Owner, the rules state you are responsible for every cost related to that area. So when the waterproofing fails, your responsibility. Now, what happens if he doesn't? Just remember, it's still an exclusive use area. It's still common property, not part of his section. The obligation to maintain can revert back to the body corporate on the basis that it's common property. So we can use levies. Even though rules have been amended, there's still that overriding obligation in the legislation that says we need to maintain the common property. We may have given that responsibility through a management rule to another owner, or to an owner, should I say. So, but we have to ensure the body corporate that the body corporate is making sure that that owner is fulfilling the obligation, which is to maintain that piece of common property. So we can do that. And exclusive use in terms of the rules versus exclusive use in terms of the plans. Yes, the aspect of a deed and mortgageability does apply, but there's still the same obligations. And I do think that sometimes I think the rules aspect gets a little bit more clearer because they say owner responsible to maintain, we're not collecting a levy for maintenance. Just remember, the exclusive use levy is not only for maintenance. It is for other aspects as well. And I think when you read through 31C, it's important to notice that it refers to things like utilities. It refers to things like insurance, which we forget about. But what happens if you've got another aspect? We have a portion of the common area that's been delegated to the owner to maintain. But when I refer to common area, what I'm saying is lovely building at the seafront. It has glass and aluminium balustrades along the terrace or the balcony area. And the body corporate parts is that obligation. Because remember, the median line runs through the middle of that railing, the middle of the glass. So 50% owner, 50% body corporate. But this body corporate has decided many years ago that its responsibility, or the responsibility to maintain those railings, is the owner's. So by rights, the body corporate is delegated a responsibility for maintaining the common property, not exclusive use, common property to that owner. Now, management rule, yes, it has to be. I think such an obligation should be a management rule. It should be unanimously decided. If it wasn't from the outset, then it's something that should be through the management rules. To determine how that rule is to be enforced, there will always be conditions. You need to maintain. You don't need to pay a levy. If you don't, we have the obligation to attend to it and recover that cost from you. So those kind of rules need to be drafted quite clearly. There mustn't be any ambiguity. maybe even a time frame, similar to what we had in the old management rule 70, saying if you don't maintain it within 30 days, we want to go ahead and do it. Because it'll always get to the point where what happens if that owner doesn't uphold their responsibilities and the glass is delaminating and the railing is rusting? What happens? We need to put the obligation on the body corporate once again to maintain, to take over its right again. And once again, this can come out of levies because the management rule is giving that authority. And we aren't lending that owner money. We're actually attending to maintenance, which we're obligated to do by virtue of Management Rule 3. We're not contravening Management Rule 21.2, and we are giving, we have got the right to do it because the rules say so, and we have the right to recover it. Obviously, the right to recover nowadays, most importantly, I think when you get to these kind of scenarios is to remember we can't just go put that on a person's levy account. We need to go and get it back from that owner through a court action or through community schemes ombud services. And so we must always take that into consideration. It's a these are the little tricky parts which can put a body corporate or the trustees in a lot of hot water, and that owner who ultimately is in the wrong position have a technicality as to why he's not going to pay that. But you haven't followed a process, you've done this wrong. Ultimately, I'm pretty sure you're going to get that money back from him. But follow the right processes, because otherwise you end up taking forever to get something back from that owner. All right, so those are the three kinds of areas where our levy, which specifically is for common property, can be used in respect of a section. Because just coming back to our aspect where we talk about a railing, just remember we are maintaining a portion of his section as well. The inside of that railing is part of his section and his obligation to maintain. We're acting on the basis that the rule says that whole railing is his, and we're taking care of the entire obligation of owner and body corporate. So that's our scenarios. Those are the fine lines and why we have sectional title consulting attorneys there, because managing agents, and there are some great managing agents out there right throughout South Africa, guys that will, I think, can step up and, you know, they may not have that LLB behind their names, but their practical knowledge is right up there. They know what they're talking about. But sometimes that little letterhead with that lovely degree behind it seems to carry a lot more weight, and trustees feel and owners feel, whoa, this is better. But it's not wrong. I really support it. Zelinda going into this particular industry, I think, has been one of the best things around. We need more and more of this, but I'm not trying to take any work away from Zelinda, although she just needs to spend some time with baby. It's great to have that. And I encourage trustees to make use of these facilities. Managing agents are great. I will never run a managing agent down, but we need to have the foresight to go to consultants, because they're going to give the right advice, and they're also going to consider what other aspects we're not thinking of. All right, so that's the story. I know it's taking you on a whole different route, and I just want to make sure Mr. Uptight and Mrs. Know-it-all are definitely fictitious figures. I'm not referring to any of Sandak Lewin's clients or any other managing agent's clients, but yeah, that is our little session for today. Zelinda, open to any questions from any of the participants.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carl. I messaged Nicole during it and I said, it's because it's so easy to follow you and to understand you, and you speak in such a conversational way. It was very, very nice to listen to, and so practical as well. And that's something that I always like to deal with my clients as well, is to deal with things from a practical perspective. So even though I've got all the ABCs behind the name and all the black and white and all that fun stuff, having a background having a background as being a managing agent helps you be able to define things and deal with things from a practical perspective. And that's what your owners and your trustees need. So definitely managing agents, super, super important. I did think once or twice that I was either Mrs. Know-it-all or Mr. Uptight. I've been both of those in situations. It's funny when you're dealing with your own property in your own home, you suddenly forget the letter of the law and the emotions come into place. And I think that's what we deal with very often, especially managing agents. We did have a couple of questions during the course of the presentation. The one question, Carl, you did deal with is, should this delegation be a conduct rule or a management rule? And you confirmed a management rule. There was a question relating to a homeowners association, which I answered. There was an interesting question from Raymond about what happens if the balcony is part of the section and the body corporate does a redecoration, in other words, repainting. Does the owner or does the body corporate have to attend to that painting? And then, of course, what do you do to ensure that the owner doesn't go ahead and paint their balcony, which is part of their section, different to the other buildings? I don't know, Cole, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, balconies, a lot of owners seem to, it's their personal space. So there's reasonability in terms of allowing people to make it a bit more personal. So I must say a difficult one, because when you paint a building, you're going to paint the whole building. You're going to paint that patio or balcony as well, because you're going to keep it that same color. So I don't think it would be, you're trying to maintain that overall aesthetic appearance of the property, keep it to the point that it's similar right across. I know harmonious appearance hasn't been brought across from the old legislation into the new, but it also comes back to, what do your conduct rules say? Because when you change that outer appearance, you need to start taking into consideration how it impacts on, I believe, investment value, because it may look great to you as the owner, but when you look at the entire building, what is it doing? So I think sometimes the trustees need to be a little bit more black and white and say, yeah, you can hang that pot plant, hang the pot plant, but we don't want to have a whole decoration and a half. I just digress slightly, because Zelinda's old building, we had an apartment that thought hanging surfboards on your balcony looked very nice. That was because he was a surfer, but for the rest of us, it didn't. But yeah, we come to the aspect of enclosing balconies, and the people then make it their personal space. They may not have incorporated it into their section by virtue of removing a wall, but they make it their personal space. And I think body corporates need to just be very careful there. Trustees need to be careful. When you're enclosing a balcony, please remember you are creating common area that the body corporate needs to maintain, because the outside is now body corporate responsibility, unless you've changed your rules. And that's, I think, is the thing. We need to remember we can change our rules. We can actually go and say, when you enclose your balcony, well, it's now your problem to fix the outside. Or these are the conditions. You cannot, when you enclose your balcony, do this, 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 and this. So many of the times, body corporates go and make decisions, and they think, but when we agree to do it, we set conditions, we trustees. But you're not here in 5 years' time. The trustees change. What happens then? And that is an aspect where the rules, they're here forever, unless they get changed. And I think that's where, when you make those decisions, you need to consider how your rules have been written, how they read. Are they clear in terms of making sure that matter that you're referring to, how it's dealt with? Because the person goes and paints the inside of their balcony white, the rest of the building's a lovely eggshell, and it's going to stand out immediately. And I think then the body corporates are obligated to turn around and say, that's not allowed. You got to set it back to its original. Even though it's part of your section, it impacts on the overall appearance. And I know conduct rules do refer to that particular aspect, where they refer the Schemes Management Act rules do refer to it, and in terms of maintaining external appearance and all those kind of things. But I do believe it comes back to when we make the decision. Think it through. What do the rules say? And sometimes don't hesitate to say, we're not going to allow this. We want to take it to members in terms of dealing with it through the rules. So I don't know. I don't know if I've answered the question 100% there, Zelinda. I don't know if there's more that I should tackle.
No, I think you've answered it plus some, Carl. There's another 2 questions we'll take is, where does payment for resulting damages inside the unit fit in? Can you use body corporate funds?
Well, we must remember what 31, we come back to what 31.2b says, because, it says, and 13.1c, obligation to maintain the section rests with the body corporate. I'm sorry, with the owner. It's not the body corporate's obligation. Can we use funds to fix the inside of a section? Well, if there is a pipe that's leaking and it's an emergency, 31.2b says, yes, you can, because it's an emergency. It's something that is critical, that has to happen. We're wasting water. It's flooding the property. We're doing things that we should. And the owner may be, overseas or whatever, then we can. But if this is an instance of, maybe I should use a trivial example. The toilet's leaking, and it's not really that much of an issue, and we go ahead and fix it for the owner. And you have building supervisors who, they are, keeping the owner happy, and he uses his petty cash or gets a contractor in to fix it, and then sends the invoice to the body corporate, and they pay it because, they're going to get it back from the owner. That's not right. That obligation to maintain the section cannot just be passed on because we've now lent that owner money. We can't do it. The only time we're going to do it is if it's 31.2b saying these conditions are being met. And I know it's, we can explore those conditions. And some people will say this is a problem and this complies with 31.2b. That's fine. You've made that decision. Have you got the right guidance behind it or the right professional advice to confirm that you can and are right? Because the minute you step out of that aspect where you've got the right advice, and you may have your trustees turning around to you, your fellow trustees saying, we don't think this is our responsibility. And yeah, majority decision counts. But if you've done this for the wrong reasons, you could end up paying. And I think that's where trustees need to realize there are some risks on them. And managing agents as well, we're not to be absolved here. Some of the managing agents find that it's easier to solve a problem, but we fix it. And then it's done. And we get the money back. And then the owner doesn't pay. And one of the people come along to an AGM and say, but why did we fix that pipe inside that flat? Because now it's showing as a debtor who owes the body corporate money. So I think it's a fine line. It's a risk. I wouldn't encourage it unless there are 31.2b's been met.
Fantastic. Carl, this has been a fantastic topic, and I'm so grateful that you gave us the time and put so much effort into the preparation of it. I know that Sandic Living Trust is looking at doing a lot more of these webinars in future. So when you do hold them and they are open to non-managed buildings from your side, please do let us know. We'd like to share it with our database, and we hope that we'll be able to be part of 1 or 2 of them as well. I'm looking forward to the days that we can all get together again at physical meetings and deal with these types of debates. I feel that doing it remotely is fantastic, but we tend to hide behind our camera often and the mute button and things like that, and don't debate as much as we do face to face. So we're looking forward to that. For those of you that are in Cape Town, remember the NAMA Bowls event that's happening tomorrow. We will be popping in for a couple of minutes. Unfortunately, this year I won't be taking part in the game, but TVDM Consultants has been will be sponsoring a couple of those prizes, including best dressed as well as funkiest hat. Unfortunately, I ran out of time to go and get my funky hat, but let's hope that there's quite a few people that's going to be partaking in that tomorrow. Mike Addison, I know that you're still online. Mike is going to be our speaker at our November webinar. That's going to be on the 25th of November at 10 o'clock. And then just a reminder that the WISC webinar is not happening this morning at 11 o'clock. It's been postponed to Friday because of load shedding. And then one more thing, start thinking about it in the meantime. We're going to be having an early December webinar. webinar. I'll be presenting it along with Nicole, and we're going to be dealing with it on a Q&A basis. So come prepared with all of your questions, and we will do our best to answer them. And I hope that it's going to be nice and interactive. So start thinking about that in the meantime. And that will be just before we close, our last day being the 15th of December. And I think if I can twist Nicole's arm, we'll be coming back during the course of the week of the 10th of January. So a nice long holiday there. So make sure that you do contact us before we go on leave, because we'll be switching our emails off and switching our telephones off and all those fun things. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending today. For those of you that would like to remain afterwards, that you've got a question or two, please feel free to do that. I'll keep it open for another 5 minutes or so. Cole, you can stay if you want,
Sure.
and then we'll be sharing this recording on our website, like we said. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending. Cole, fantastic job. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody attending. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Nice to see all of the familiar faces as well.
Yeah,
thank you.
Always, hey? Always.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop your screen sharing, Cole.
Oh, please. Yes. Thank you.
And I'm going to stop the recording as well.